The sky was painted with the pale golden hue of a lazy Sunday morning. The streets were almost empty, except for the occasional chirp of birds and the distant hum of a motorbike. Somewhere far from the rush of the city, an expensive black luxury sedan rolled steadily down a narrow countryside road. Inside sat Daniel Everett, one of the most powerful and wealthiest CEOs in the country, a man whose name appeared in magazines, business news, and headlines almost weekly. But at this moment, Daniel wasn't thinking about board meetings or billion-dollar deals. He was simply enjoying the rare peace of being alone, away from the skyscrapers and suffocating schedules. The tall pine trees lining the road swayed gently in the wind. The air smelled fresh, almost too pure for someone who spent most of his life in glass towers filled with the scent of polished wood and expensive colognes. And then, it happened. The soft purr of the engine coughed once, twice, and then died completely. The dashboard flickered, and the car slowed to a stop. Daniel frowned. He turned the key again. Nothing. He tried one more time, pressing the accelerator, but the only response was a hollow click. Daniel leaned back in his seat and exhaled in frustration. His car, worth more than most people's homes, had broken, down in the middle of nowhere. He looked at his phone, but of course there was no signal, not even a single bar. He stepped out of the car, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. The wind was cooler outside, and for a moment, he just stood there, looking around. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, with no sign of another vehicle. His expensive suit and silver watch seemed completely out of place in this quiet, forgotten road. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who waited. In his world, problems were solved instantly, by assistants, by managers, by teams of people ready to act on his word. But here, he had no such luxury. Minutes passed. He checked his watch. He was growing impatient. Just then, faintly at first, he heard a creaking sound, like metal groaning under strain. It was followed by the rhythmic squeak of old pedals turning. From the far end of the road, a boy appeared, no older than 14, riding a rusty, battered bicycle that looked like it had survived decades of use. The paint was chipped, the chain rattled, and one handlebar was wrapped in tape. The boy's clothes were faded, his hair messy, and his shoes, well, calling them shoes was generous. They were torn at the edges, with the sole peeling away at the front. As the boy drew closer, his curious eyes scanned the sight before him, a tall man in a suit, standing beside a sleek black car that looked like it had come from another world. Entirely. Daniel watched him approach. Part of him expected the boy to just pass by. After all, why would a stranger stop to help? Especially someone who clearly had nothing to do with expensive cars or business suits. But to his surprise, the boy slowed down, then stopped completely. He rested one foot on the ground, holding the rusty bike steady with the other. "Sir, do you need help?" the boy asked. His voice was gentle, almost shy, but there was a firmness to it, as if offering help was simply the right thing to do, no matter who you were. Daniel hesitated. He glanced at the boy, then at the car, then back at the boy. "I don't think you can help with this," Daniel replied, half smiling. "It's a complicated engine problem." The boy shrugged. "Maybe, but sometimes even complicated things have simple fixes." Something about that sentence made Daniel pause. He didn't know whether to laugh or be impressed by the confidence in the boy's tone. He decided to humor him. "All right then, let's see what you can do." The boy leaned his rusty bike against a tree and walked toward the car. He didn't look intimidated by the luxury vehicle. In fact, he inspected it with the same calmness as a mechanic who had been doing this for years. From his worn-out school bag, he pulled out a small, old toolkit, its metal box dented, the wrenches inside clearly used many times before. "Daniel, couldn't help but notice how carefully the boy handled his tools, as if they were precious treasures. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, watching him kneel by the hood. "Ethan," the boy replied without looking up. "And you?" "Daniel," he said simply, deciding not to reveal his full identity. Ethan worked quietly, occasionally asking Daniel to try starting the engine again. He loosened a cable, tightened another, checked the battery connection, and wiped grease off. His hands with a rag that was already stained with years of repairs. Daniel stood there, oddly fascinated. This boy, dressed in rags, riding a bicycle that looked ready to fall apart, moved with skill and patience. His hands, though small, worked confidently, as though every nut, bolt, and wire was familiar territory. After about 15 minutes, Ethan stepped back and wiped his forehead. "Try it now," he said. Daniel got into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine roared back to life. Daniel blinked in surprise. The boy had done it. He stepped out of the car, smiling for the first time that morning. "How did you—" Ethan shrugged. "It was just a loose battery connection. Vibration from driving on rough roads can cause that. Simple fix." Daniel was impressed, not just with the skill, but with the casual way the boy spoke, as if helping a stranger repair a luxury car in the middle of nowhere was an everyday thing. "You just saved me a very long walk," Daniel said with a chuckle. "I owe you one." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, sir. My dad always said if you can help someone, you should. That's all." For a moment, Daniel just looked at him. Here was a boy who clearly had so little. His clothes, his bike, his tools, all spoke of hardship. Yet he carried himself with a dignity and kindness that money couldn't buy. Daniel reached for his wallet, pulling out a crisp bill. "At least, take this, for your trouble." But Ethan stepped back, his expression firm. "No, thank you, I didn't do it for money." And before Daniel could say anything else, the boy walked back to his rusty bike, picked it up, and began pedaling away. Daniel stood there, watching him disappear into the distance, the squeak of the bicycle fading with every turn of the wheels. Something about the encounter stayed with him, a quiet voice in the back of his mind that told him this was not the last time their paths would cross. At that moment, Daniel had no idea just how right that voice would be. 2 weeks had passed since that strange morning on the deserted countryside road, but Daniel Everett still couldn't get the boy out of his mind. He had met hundreds, no, thousands of people over his lifetime. Business partners, world leaders, celebrities. And yet none had left such a quiet yet lingering impression as Ethan, the boy on the rusty bike. It wasn't just the fact that Ethan had fixed his car. It was the way he had refused payment. That kind of humility was rare. In Daniel's world, favors were exchanged like currency, always with an expectation of something in return. But Ethan, he had simply helped and left, as if the moment meant nothing. On this particular afternoon, Daniel was in his glass-walled office, overlooking the sprawling city. The view from the 52nd floor was magnificent, but his thoughts were elsewhere. His assistant, Linda, stood at the doorway. "Sir, the conference call with the board is ready," she said. Daniel nodded but didn't move right away. Instead, he stared at the file on his desk, a folder marked Community Outreach Programs. His company donated millions each year to charities, but he suddenly realized he'd never actually stepped into the lives of those he was supposedly helping. He wondered where Ethan was at that moment. Was he at school, working, riding that same squeaky bicycle down some quiet street? The thought wouldn't leave him. The next weekend, Daniel decided to take the same road where his car had broken down. Part of him felt foolish. After all, what were the chances he'd see Ethan again? Still, he drove slowly, eyes scanning the roadside. And then, there he was. Ethan was pedaling along, the same worn-out school bag bouncing lightly on his back. This time, Daniel pulled over ahead of him. The boy slowed down, recognizing the man instantly. "You again," Ethan said with a small grin, pulling up beside the car. "Me again," Daniel replied. "I owe you a proper thank you. At least let me take you to lunch." Ethan hesitated. I have to get somewhere." "Where?" Daniel asked. "Work," the boy said simply. "I help out at a repair shop after school." Daniel's brow furrowed. "On a Sunday?" Ethan gave a half smile. "Sundays are busier, more breakdowns. People travel a lot." There it was again. That quiet sense of responsibility, the matter-of-fact way Ethan spoke about work as if it was just another part of life. "All right," Daniel said. "Then I'll drop you there." Ethan looked at his bike. "And my ride?" Daniel smiled. "We'll put it in the trunk." The repair shop was nothing like the sleek corporate offices Daniel was used to. It was small, with a faded sign, cracked concrete floors, and the smell of oil in the air. A man in his late 50s was bent over a car hood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey, kiddo," the man called, smiling as Ethan entered. Then he noticed Daniel. "Friend of yours?" "He's the man whose car I fixed that day," Ethan explained. The older man chuckled. "Ah, so you're the stranded CEO." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You know who I am?" The man shrugged. "News travels. Not every day a billionaire's car breaks down out here." Daniel glanced at Ethan. "You didn't say anything." Ethan shrugged. "Didn't matter. You were just someone who needed help." That simple statement caught Daniel off guard. In his life, people either treated him as a source of opportunity or as someone to be cautious around. But Ethan had treated him like a normal human being. Daniel spent the afternoon there watching Ethan work. The boy moved with the same quiet skill as before, fixing a loose chain on a motorbike, replacing a spark plug in an old truck. The tools were basic, the pay was probably next to nothing, but Ethan's focus never wavered. At one point, Daniel asked, "Why do you work here? Don't you have schoolwork friends? Time to just be a kid?" Ethan's smile faded a little. "School's important, but so is helping my mom. She works 2 jobs. My dad, he's not around anymore. The shop owner here, Mr. Hayes, he's been like family, so I help when I can." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of fact. Later, as the day wound down, Daniel stepped outside with Ethan. The sun was setting, bathing, the road in a warm, golden glow. "Ethan," Daniel said carefully, "have you ever thought about what you want to do years from now?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I want to be an engineer. I want to design machines, maybe even cars, the kind that don't break down so easily." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's a big dream." "It's the only one I've got," Ethan replied. Daniel could feel something stirring inside him, a mix of admiration and guilt. He thought of all the times he'd sat in meetings about innovation, surrounded by million-dollar prototypes, yet here was a boy with real talent and no resources to nurture it. "What if I told you," Daniel began slowly, "that I could help you get there?" Ethan frowned. "You mean money?" "I mean opportunity," Daniel said. "Proper education, training, the tools you need to make that dream real." Ethan looked away, kicking at a pebble. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. "Because sometimes the right people come into our lives for a reason, and I think you're one of them." Ethan didn't give an answer right away. In fact, for the next week, Daniel didn't hear from him at all. He didn't want to push. He knew that trust wasn't something you bought. It was earned. Then, one evening, his assistant came into the office holding a small envelope. "A boy dropped this off for you," she said. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. In handwriting that was a little uneven but determined, Ethan had written, "If you really mean what you said, I'm ready to try." Daniel leaned, back in his chair, a smile spreading slowly across his face. He didn't know it yet, but this decision, this small act of helping a boy with a dream, was about to change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. It began quietly, without grand speeches or flashing cameras. No headlines, no press releases, just a handshake between a billionaire CEO and a boy on a rusty bike, an unspoken promise that things were about to change. Daniel didn't just write a check for Ethan's school fees. He went further, arranging for him to attend one of the best private schools in the city, covering tuition, books, uniforms, even transportation. For the first time, Ethan's bicycle wasn't the only way. He could get somewhere. But there was one condition. Ethan had to keep working just as hard as he always had. No favors, no special treatment. Only effort would earn the reward, and Ethan agreed without hesitation. The transition wasn't easy. On his first day at the new school, Ethan walked into classrooms filled with polished shoes, brand new backpacks, and students who had grown up with private tutors and summer camps abroad. He felt out of place, like a stray cat wandering into a royal banquet. Some kids whispered, others stared. One boy even laughed at Ethan's old shoes, which Daniel had insisted he keep for the first week as a reminder of where he'd started. But Ethan didn't flinch. He took notes diligently, asked questions in class, and spent hours in the library reading about engineering, mechanics, and design. The teachers noticed his hunger to learn, and slowly, so did his classmates. Daniel, meanwhile, kept a quiet watch from the sidelines, checking in every few weeks, never smothering Ethan with attention, but always making sure the boy knew he had someone in his corner. Years passed. The rusty bicycle was eventually replaced by a small motorbike, a gift from Daniel when Ethan turned 16. But Ethan kept the old one, storing it carefully in Mr. Hayes's repair shop. By the time he finished high school, Ethan had not only earned top grades, but had also won a national competition for young inventors. His project was a cost-effective modification for small motorcycle engines that increased fuel efficiency by 30%. Daniel was there in the front row, watching as Ethan received his award. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, they both remembered that quiet road, the broken-down car, and the boy who had simply stopped to help. With Daniel's continued support, Ethan entered one of the top engineering universities in the country. College was a new world, bigger challenges, harder tests, and far less hand-holding. But Ethan thrived, working in the campus lab late into the night, often covered in grease and surrounded by half-assembled prototypes. And through it all, he never forgot the small repair shop where it had all started. On weekends, he would return to help Mr. Hayes, who now proudly told every customer that this young man was going to change the world. The real turning point came in Ethan's final year at university. Daniel's company had been struggling to develop a new line of affordable, eco-friendly motorcycles for developing markets. The engineers had hit a wall, production costs were too high, and performance suffered when they tried to cut corners. Daniel invited Ethan to visit the research facility, partly to inspire him, partly because deep down he believed the boy might just see something the experts had missed. Ethan walked through the lab slowly, studying the prototypes. He asked quiet questions, then began sketching on a piece of paper. Within 2 days, he presented a revised design for the engine housing and fuel system. It wasn't perfect, but it was promising, and most importantly, it was affordable to produce. The lead engineers were skeptical at first, but when they tested Ethan's design, the results spoke for themselves. Costs dropped by nearly 25%, and performance actually improved. Daniel made a decision on the spot. Ethan would be brought on as a junior engineer after graduation, not because of their history, but because he had earned it. The next 5 years moved quickly. Ethan rose through the ranks, his ideas breathing fresh life into the company. He wasn't just an employee, he became Daniel's right hand, a trusted voice in meetings, and a constant reminder that innovation wasn't about who had the most money, but who had the clearest vision. Then came the day Daniel announced his retirement. At a press conference attended by journalists from across the country, he introduced his successor. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and then the name was spoken. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel said, his voice steady, "I'm proud to announce that the new CEO of Everett Motors will be Ethan Hayes." Gasps filled the room. Some reporters flipped through their notes, confused. Others smiled knowingly, recalling old rumors about a boy who once fixed a billionaire's car. Ethan stepped onto the stage, wearing a tailored suit but carrying the same calm confidence he had on that quiet road years ago. He shook Daniel's hand, and for a brief moment, they exchanged a look that said everything words couldn't. After the press conference, Daniel and Ethan stood alone in the CEO's office. The city stretched out before them, bathed in the glow of sunset. "You know," Daniel said quietly, "the day my car broke down, I thought I was unlucky, but it turns out it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Ethan smiled. "Funny, I thought I was just helping a stranger." Daniel chuckled. "You weren't just helping me, Ethan. You changed my life. And now, you're going to change a lot more lives." The years that followed proved him right. Under Ethan's leadership, Everett Motors expanded into markets that had never before been able to afford reliable transportation. Jobs were created, communities were lifted, and the company became a symbol of innovation with purpose. But Ethan never forgot where he came from. He still visited the old repair shop, now run by a younger apprentice, and kept the rusty bicycle in his office, not as decoration, but as a daily reminder. When journalists asked about the bike, he always told the same story. "It's there to remind me that no matter how far you go, never forget the road that brought you here." And somewhere in that story, there was always a quiet nod to the man whose broken-down car had started it all. That single chance encounter had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A boy on a rusty bike had stopped to help. And in doing so, he had changed the life of a billionaire CEO, and, in the process, countless others.